Powerful guidance and powerful transformation. That's amazing.
This is something we are going to look at going deeper on.
I love the way you're using the metaphor music everywhere, because music is all around you, right?
What I find that for many of the challenges we take on, we grow against resistance. I think educating is a challenging position.
So happy you were open to sharing what you love, so I could help you tap into what you love and create all the other things that you were already creating, of course, but with new light. Today, my guest is my friend, Steven Schecter. Steven is the co-founder and CEO of MuchSmarter, a company that teaches young people how to use their minds to create the lives they want. MuchSmarter provides online learning games in the US and the UK to teach students successful habits of thinking, feeling, and learning. The games incorporate the experience Steve and his team have acquired from coaching hundreds of students since 2004. That's a lot of time, right? MuchSmarter students learn to approach all learning challenges with confidence, poise, and skill. I'm so happy to have you here with me, Steven. Welcome.
Delighted to be here, Theodora, and I want to applaud you for the wonderful work that you do. I know personally, I've gotten to benefit personally from your wisdom and have made great strides from a lot of the wisdom that you've shared with me.
I'm so grateful for this, Steven. I'm so happy for you. And I'm sure you're going to see lots of new things coming up in your life in the next few months, because you're doing the work. You're doing the work. You're setting the pace for yourself as well. So I have some questions for us today for you, and the questions are over here. So I'm going to go with the first question I have. How did you find yourself with the mission of teaching young people how to use their minds to create the lives they want, Steven?
That's a wonderful question, Theodora. Thank you. I think for me, I found myself with this mission accidentally. I call MuchSmarter originally was my accidental tutoring company. I had a successful career as a developer of products. I developed products for large companies and small. I found that I was missing something in my life. I want to call it a union of head and heart. My product management challenged me intellectually. It was stimulating, but I didn't feel like my heart was as much engaged as I wanted it to be. So I began volunteering with young people, primarily in New York City. And one day, a gentleman who was a college advisor at a school on Long Island said to me, "I really wish you were available to help our young people with their academics." I had no idea how he knew I was capable of helping them. I didn't think he was serious, and so I said, "No problem." And he began referring students to me. This was in 2004. And what began as a trickle of students became a flood. I began to say yes, and it grew kind of spontaneously, and that was how my accidental tutoring company was born, and that's how I found myself with the mission of helping young people create the lives they want.
Wow, wow, that's really powerful. And is this how MuchSmarter got started?
This is how MuchSmarter got started, and I started the work based on what I'd learned about myself as a learner, what I learned from having been a parent, teenagers, what I'd learned from volunteering with teenagers in New York City. But I started with a theory, and my theory was, or call it a hypothesis, my hypothesis was that our success is a product of how we think, how we feel, and how we learn. And I began applying that right away. And I found that my clients responded more emotionally to our work than they would have if I merely helped their children get a higher grade or a higher test score. I think they sensed something really meaningful was going on, and that was why we really developed powerful relationships with our clients and students. And that's how it got started. Over time, we evolved our thinking to say it's not merely how you think, how you feel, and how you learn, but it's our habits of thinking, habits of feeling, and habits of learning. As someone once said, habits become character, and character becomes destiny.
Exactly. This is our personality in the end, our habits, a stack of habits. Powerful, powerful. And what is the most important transformation you help your students achieve?
That's another great question. Let's talk first about habits of thinking. What you will often find is that by the time a young person is, say, 15 or 16 years old, they've already become an expert on what they can't do. They typically have a self-assessment around here, and they have an assessment of difficulty here. What we like to do is reverse it. We like to have them think of their own capability way up here and the difficulty of their challenges way down here. So that, by effective habits of thinking, that's what we fundamentally do. We help a student really see and understand and practice the idea that their capability is much greater than they know, and they learn how to shrink difficulty. They learn that difficulty is only temporary, that difficulty is only perceptual, and they can master it.
That's really powerful for their later life, not only for adolescents. Yeah. And what habits of feeling now do you find are the most useful?
I'm glad you asked, because that's the second important transformation. I was thinking recently about a student named Shannon, and this was a student I had some years ago, but I thought about her because Shannon was quite, I want to say, worried, stressed out, and that made it very difficult for her to perform academically. I found on academic subjects or tests, she was just deeply wound up. And what was very interesting was that for Shannon, just the idea that her emotions were not who she was, but that her emotions were in fact the way she'd learned to respond to life situations, when she understood that that was that gave her all kinds of hope, and she became way less worried, way less stressed, way less anxious in a stunningly short period of time, just by the understanding that her emotional state was something she could choose. So that's a huge transformation. When we understand that our emotionality is not who we are, but how we've learned to perform, that also sends us the message that we can unlearn an old emotional way of being and learn a desired emotional way of being. So that's the central message of habits of feeling.
Powerful.
What emotional state do you choose to bring to the games you play in life?
Powerful, powerful guidance and powerful transformation. That's amazing. And what about the habits of learning? Which ones are the most helpful for students?
Another fantastic question. I want to kind of talk about the primary one. All of these habits of thinking, feeling, and learning get broken down. In fact, we have 10 in each category. But the primary habit of learning is a metaphor that I learned as a musician who became strong academically as a byproduct of having become an accomplished musician. I found that any learning challenge can successfully be approached as a game of skill. And the nature of any game of skill is that you can gain a measure of detachment from your subject matter. You don't have to get caught up in how smart you are, or treat every game as if it's a test of your ability or a test of your innate intelligence. You can look at a game in a detached way and say, okay, what's the objective of the game? What are the rules? What, how does a good player get good at this game? And then you can kind of follow up a path towards mastery of the game. And you can do it in a detached way, which is very powerful. So I found that I could translate my knowledge of how to break down a piano piece into knowledge of how to break down a math problem or a physics problem or a chemistry problem or whatever have you problem. So our number one learning habit is approach learning challenges from the standpoint of a game of skill.
Wow. And what happens when students are faced with a game, right? They just...
The beauty of it, Theodora, is that most students, not all, but most students already have a game that they've mastered.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can become awake to the fact that they're already successful. I mean,
Yes.
how great is that? For example, I have a student recently who's generally struggling academically, but we discovered that he's a superstar in the gym. He's transformed himself from somebody who can lift 50 pounds to somebody who can lift 400 pounds. And so when I asked him to break down the process of how he got from 50 to 400 pounds, he was able to lay it out in great detail. He was able to talk with great confidence and authority about how it's important to persist and how it's important not to give up and all of these important things that he learned. So I was able to say to him, well, what would happen if you took that understanding
Exactly.
and you applied it to just one subject, not all of them. You don't need to do it all at once. Just transfer that skill set to one subject. What do you suppose would happen? And the story is still being written, Theodora, but his response was as if he got shot out of a cannon. He was so happy and excited and exuberant because he realized he'd mastered one game, and now if he chose, he could
Yeah.
set about to master another.
Yeah. You turn on the lights for him to see that he has all it takes to do it, to reproduce it whenever he wants. Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. And how does MuchSmarter use games?
So games are our context. I think what I'm about to discuss is really a matter of decision and choice rather than something that I believe is right for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that I know there's a certain amount of joy that you need nothing for.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a certain amount of joy in being, and there's a certain amount of joy in having a heart full of love. Um, on the same token, if I want to write a symphony, there's a certain amount of work that goes into it. If I want to build a business, there's a certain amount of work that goes into it. So what I find that for many of the challenges we take on, we grow against resistance. We grow against challenge. There are certain types of growth we cannot simply achieve by sitting in a relaxed, upright position and meditating. And again, I'm not saying this in any kind of judgmental way. Someone who chooses to spend a contemplative and meditative life is somebody I entirely respect.
Mm-hmm.
But the role of games is to provide the kind of learning and the kind of inner transformative growth that happens when you confront challenge. So a game is a kind of dress rehearsal for the stresses that life throws us. When I discover that I can take on a difficult academic subject and neutralize it and make it something that I'm comfortable with, isn't that an experience that I can take with me when I go into the business world and confront a difficult problem? Well, I know how to define problems, don't I, from my academic experience. I know how to break things down, don't I? So there's the function of games. The games are a crucible against which we form character, we build persistence, we build confidence.
Powerful tools in their toolkit. Lucky students. And how do you see MuchSmarter supporting educators now?
Well, I think this was something beautiful that you pointed out to me. I think that we ultimately empower the student by empowering the educator and vice versa. Um, I think that I think educating is a challenging position. I think every educator can see herself as an agent for a student's personal growth. I think every educator has that opportunity. And so I think every educator has that opportunity and also has the opportunity of learning things for herself that will be transformative for her student. And then they become ultimately partners in the student's growth and development. And the reason why that's so powerful, I think we can look at parenting as an example. The other day, someone asked me about, what advice I would give parents. And I thought about it quickly. I've been a parent myself. I am a parent. That's a relationship that never ends. But I found that the heart of it is not what you say, but who you are. That children, particularly in the teenagers are trying to sort out their own identity. So sometimes they don't want to listen to you, but they do learn immeasurably by observing who you are. They look for inspiration, for example, sometimes for guidance, but it's really, so I think the educator, by learning these habits of thinking, feeling, and learning and mastering them themselves, will amplify what they're able to do for their students.
And do you feel that MuchSmarter can support parents as well?
I think that, yeah, I
future?
think that this is something we are going to look at going deeper on. In other words, the first thing and the first circle, and it's not a trivial one. The first circle is, how do we serve students in developing successful habits of thinking, feeling, and learning? I don't feel that's a closed book. I feel that there's much to learn in answering that question. And then the second ring is, how do we help educators help students develop successful habits of thinking, feeling, and learning? And then it's how we can best support parents in that role. So ultimately, we do all three. In terms of our tools, the tools are focused on students. I often have parents ask if I mind if they peek over their students' shoulders while they're learning these lessons, because they understand that the variables that the students are learning to deal with are meaningful for adults as well. But it's a great question, and we'll have more and more to say about the role that parents play, and we'll give more and more thought to how we support parents in the process.
And the way you're supporting your students right now, when they get to become parents, they will be equipped with all these tools,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
indirectly, you're already helping parents.
Yeah. Well, the fundamental thing that I noticed in our private practice of working with students one-on-one is that particularly in the teenage years, and so that's why I'm focusing in on this theme of the teenage years. Very often, our job is to help get a message to students that the student doesn't really want to hear from the parent. And so a parent is dying to share with the young person what they've learned about being successful. It's very heartrending to see a highly successful parent who wants to share the secrets of success with his or her teenage children, and the children don't want to hear it. So so in that way we're already mightily supporting parents, because we're giving the teenagers messages that teenagers can think about for themselves, and because we're not their parents, they don't resist us. You know, we can engage the student, we can coach the student, we can help the student, and many of the messages and skills we share with students are things that parents would like to see their teenagers learn.
Wow, powerful, powerful. And how do you see MuchSmarter contributing to education as a whole?
That's another beautiful question. Thank you. Uh, I got a question from someone the other day who asked, "What is it? How can we really help education?" I mean, education has the challenge that of constrained resources. I mean, if you look at a public school system, um, you have one teacher for 20 kids, one teacher for 30 kids, one teacher for 40 kids. And they said, how can we really change things? How can we change things for the better? And three words: empower the student.
Hmm.
If the student understands how to be the captain of her own learning, and if a teacher is, in theory, facing a class of 30 students who know how to learn,
Exactly.
the system has fundamentally changed.
Exactly.
It begins with the student. And
Yes.
this does not cut out the teacher by any means. It actually elevates the teacher, because with a class full of empowered students, the teacher and students can together look at solving higher order problems. If students can, for example, through our games, learn the fundamentals, um, it would be the equivalent to having a great rock band where all of the musicians are already great, and now they can team up to create transcendent music. So in this way, with empowered students, the class of 30 can team up to create transcendent biology or chemistry or whatever it is they're creating in that class.
I love the way you're using the metaphor of music everywhere, because music is all around you, right?
It's a metaphor that was my first game. So and it's a game that sticks with me, and I don't mind saying to our audience today, thanks to your teaching, I have wholeheartedly reintegrated it into my life, and even my business life in a way. Not that my business is anything about music, but there is nothing but wonderful in me adopting the energy and inspiration I get from music to empower everything else I do. And thank you for that, Theodora.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy you were open to sharing what you love, so I could help you tap into what you love and create all the other things that you were already creating, of course, but with new light, right?
New light, yes.
New light. Powerful. And what is one tip that you can give to our audience? Could be teenagers, could be parents, could be teachers. What is one tip that they could use right now?
I think that if I could give anyone three words to power their lives, I would say use your mind.
Mm.
I think that when I use that phrase, it gets mixed reactions, because many people interpret that as not giving adequate respect for hard intelligence or gut intelligence. But I think that our mind is our mediator with the external world and the internal world of our emotions. It's our captain. It's
Mhm.
how we learn to let go of the thinking and emotions that don't serve us and to build habits of thinking and feeling that do serve us. And I think it's become even more important than ever today. I think that educators and students and parents are going to be seduced by relying too much on artificial intelligence.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of technology. I'm a technologist, and yet I feel like the metaphor here is uh, we just because we have a world of conveniences doesn't mean we don't want to have a strong physical being. And I think that the great thing is to learn how to use your mind and to keep strengthening it for life. And it's through that facility of thinking, feeling, and learning that we build everything else in our world. So the
Mhm.
tip is use your mind.
Yes, it's a muscle. We have to continue practicing with this muscle, not let it rest. Because if we let it rest, it's gone, right?
Yeah, and I think the idea is more profound than I ever realized. Um, for example, someone we both admire, Dr. Joe Dispenza. When we contemplate that on the level that I'm talking about, using one's mind to create successful habits of thinking, feeling, and learning, that's very fundamental and very powerful. But let's go one step further with Dr. Joe Dispenza. What if, by learning to use our mind in a certain way and at a certain level, we're actually able to tap into the quantum, to be able to tap into universal intelligence? Then doesn't that amplify the point I've made? Can there be anything more important than learning to use your mind? Because it is, in fact, the vehicle through which we create our world.
Exactly. Exactly. And it doesn't happen through thinking intensively, right? It happens when we stop thinking. And we need to practice that as well. So we need somebody to guide us
Yeah.
and help us stop thinking. Really, really powerful. Thank you, Stephen, so much. And how can somebody work with you? So let's say somebody would like to connect with you and would like to learn from you, whether it is a parent for their kid or an educator who would like to learn more. How can somebody connect with you?
I think that I'd love to invite people to visit our website, uh,
Mm-hmm.
muchsmarter.com, just to get familiar with our message, with our method. Um, if you happen to be a student in the US or UK, I certainly invite you to try our games.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an educator, I would invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Over the months and years ahead, we'll be um, building alliances with educators. And I think that to begin by getting to know each other personally, we can begin to be in a place where we can communicate about an alliance that might be meaningful to you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking now to you, the people that we're together speaking to, Theodora.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure lots of people would like to connect with you and get to know you more because you're a wonderful person. I can.
Thank you for that, Theodora.
Yeah, and it was such a lovely um, thing that such a lovely experience that we connected and we worked together, and I got to know you more about you, and hopefully have helped you as much as I could.
Very much so, and the impact of what I've learned from you is resonating and will resonate into the years ahead. As I said early on in our relationship, I consider myself a business development expert, and so I'm very selective about coaching with anyone. And so you were what you had to communicate and what you had to teach was and is special.
Wow, that's really special for me now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Steven,
Thank you for having me here.
for accepting the invitation to be in this podcast.